Welcome everyone. So my name is Andy and I'm going to take you through a kind of a warm-up which you can use for going into some deeper stretches which I've put together on other videos which I will at some point link in the description below this video. Now what I'm going to take you through is quite straightforward. There's a part A and a part B. Part A is some standing movements which start to get the spine moving in all three planes of motion, and then a little standing sequence which starts to mobilize into the ankles, knees and the hips, but also challenges some kind of stabilization in the hips and also challenges your balance. So they're very gentle. They're quite simple, quite straightforward movements, but they are very, very important in terms of preparing you to be able to benefit from your stretching exercises in a much deeper way. So if you go straight into the stretches and you neglect this part, you tend not to get the same improvements. Also, if anyone's kind of into athletics in a deep way, this can be very restorative. So even if you don't do the stretches, you'll find that the movements I'm going to go through in this video will hopefully improve the way that you feel, release a lot of tension, and it's a very good thing to do as a bit of a warm-up in the morning. So I often do this. If I get up in the morning and I'm feeling very stiff, it's a great way of just starting the day. And give it a go and try some of the stretching videos as well, and feel free to let me know how you're getting on. So to start, we're just going to stand kind of comfortably, feet roughly shoulder or hip distance apart, and we're simply going to reach down to the side, come back up and then over to the other side. So a simple side to side movement. And once you've done that a few times, as you're reaching down the side, we're going to lift up the shoulder. And what we're trying to do with the movement is to try not to push the hips out as you do it. So keep your hips in the center, slide down the side, lift the shoulder up, and we're mobilizing the spine in this kind of side to side pattern, which is the frontal plane. And what will happen is you'll feel a kind of stretching down the side of the body as you lean over to one side. So we're then going to take it a bit further. So this is quite simple. So keeping the legs straight, as we now reach down to the side, we're going to make it a scoop. And as we're scooping, so if I take this hand as an example, I'm reaching down and I'm scooping, which brings a little bit of rotation into the movement. So it makes it a little bit more complex for the brain, which is a good thing. Stimulating the brain really helps with improving movement. But it also means that it's not just a side-to-side movement. A little bit of rotation can change just very subtly how it feels. And so as we're scooping with one side, so I'm scooping with this side downwards, this other side, you can lift and roll backwards. So we're getting a shoulder rotation in a backwards direction, the side-to-side movements. And we're getting a lot of head movement. So a lot of these movements that we do initially in this sequence have a lot of head movement, which stimulates the inner ear. And when you stimulate the inner ear, that in turn will stimulate a part of your brain called the cerebellum. And that's a part of your brain which is all to do primarily with movement. And one of the things that's really good about stimulating the cerebellum is that when it fires up, it stimulates the spinal stabilizers. So it's very good for kind of preparing you for any kind of core stability or anything where you need to stabilize. And if you find that one side of your cerebellum is firing normally and the other side is inhibited, you end up with an unstable spine, which can lead also to unstable pelvis and shoulders. So getting head movements can really help to equalize your stability through your spine. So we're going to do one more part to this side movement, which is as you're scooping, soften into the knees and then come back up. Soften and raise back up. And this adds a little bit more to the head movement. So it means that the head, as well as moving from side to side with a little bit of the rotation from the scooping, will also have an up and down movement to it. So it's a very subtle, very soft movement, but there's a lot of very subtle complexity to it. And then you can finish the one that you're doing, and that completes the first plane of motion, that frontal plane. And then we're going to go into the next movement. So with the feet, we're going to turn each foot out 45 degrees. And then from here, we're going to go into a twist. And if you look at my feet, you'll notice that as I'm twisting, I'm lifting the heel on the back foot and pivoting kind of onto the toes. And this allows the sacrum to open up very gently. And then if you then also gently look over the shoulder, you're going to get a twist which includes the opening of the sacrum a little bit, right up through your lumbar spine, through the torso and into your neck. So it's a lovely twist. And if you allow the arms just to be nice and heavy and let them just land on the body wherever they feel, you're going to get this lovely soothing, relaxing feel to the movement. And then we're going to change it slightly. So we're going to let one arm come up over the shoulder. And you might notice that when you start to do this, you get this little bit of opening in the shoulder blade. This kind of releasing and stretching. And then we're going to change it again. So we're going to bring, so you can clasp your elbows and just hold them roughly at your kind of chest level, and then start to twist in this way. And you might feel that this starts to bring a lot of the awareness to where you feel it into the upper torso. Try and keep your shoulders relaxed. And then we're going to change it again. So we're now going to bring, if you're able to, forearms together. So your hands are almost in front of your face. And then try twisting with that position. And it might feel different again. And then we're going to take the hands above the head. So we just take the hands upwards. And so when you take your hands higher than your head, there's a reflex in your body that lengthens your spine. So this helps to encourage a taller posture, a longer spine. And by taking a little bit of the tension out of the discs and the vertebrae, you often feel that the twist feels a little bit different. So just remember how that feels, and then we're going to bring the hands back to clasping on the forearms. Just do a couple each side, and then release and let the arms come all the way back down to your side. So we just finish as we started, with the arms just relaxed, and just allow a little bit of letting go, and then come to a stop. So that was a twisting movement. And so twisting movements are in the transverse plane, which means there's one more plane of motion, which is the sagittal plane. And we're going to do that with feet anywhere from hip to shoulder distance apart. We take the hands up, and then we bend the knees coming forwards, and then back again. So we've got this lovely flexion as we come forwards through the spine, and extension as we come back up. So we've got lovely big shoulder movements, lots of head movement. And it's up to you how deep into that movement you go. So if you were very problems with your back or your hips, you could just make it very small or very slow. But the deeper you go, the more kind of benefit you'll get, as long as you're not creating any discomfort. And then if you want to take this movement a little bit further, as you come forward, let both arms come out to the side, and then go to the other side. So you're bringing in a little bit of rotation, a little bit more complexity into the movement. And then finish the one that you're doing, and then you can relax. So in this next part, there's not really any head movement, but there is balance needed. And so whereas head movement will stimulate the inner ear, standing on one leg will actually create a need for your inner ear to actually be receiving a lot of information from the body and correcting and making sure you don't fall over. So there is still a lot of inner ear stimulation just from the standing on one leg. And then as you're doing the movements will be kind of throwing your balance off very subtly, and that really adds to that inner ear stimulation, which is something that really kind of adds to the impact of what we're doing. So we're going to take the weight onto one leg, and then we're just going to circle with the foot. So it's a very simple movement, and then circle the other way. Now the leg that you're standing on, I want you to feel that you're pushing down into the floor, but not necessarily hitching up on the other side. So you're keeping the pelvis level, but by pushing down, it engages your gluteus medius, which is very important for lateral, which is kind of this plane or stabilization through the hips. So just complete another couple of circles, and then we do a little movement through the knee. So it's essentially like a kicking motion, but it's quite soft, just hinging through the knee. And then what we start to do is, as we straighten the knee, we turn the foot in, we bend it, and then the next time we straighten, we turn it out. And so we're alternating between those two directions each time we straighten the leg. And it's essentially bringing the hip and the knee together in this kind of coordinated mobilizing pattern. And then we bring the knee up to hip height, and we just rock side to side very gently. So we're just gently rocking into the hip. And then we start to put a circle into the lower leg. And then we change direction, we circle the other way. And then foot back down, and we just repeat that on the other side. So we start with circles with the foot, making sure that you feel that you're pushing that other leg down into the floor. So we're engaging into the hip, into that gluteus medius. If your balance isn't very good, you could hold onto the wall, but it is better to actually try to keep your balance, because then you're actually challenging yourself in a way which you're not if you're using the wall to balance you. And then change direction, do the other side. But having said that, if you really do need the wall and that's the only way you can do it, or hold onto a chair, then by all means do that. And then we go into the kicking motion. So very soft movement. And then every time we straighten the leg, we start to turn the foot in and then out. So we straighten the leg, turn in, bend the knee, straighten, turning out. And feel it as a movement in your hip and your knee coordinated together. And then bring the knee up to hip height, and we go side to side, just rocking gently into the hip. And then put some circles into the lower leg. Change direction, circle the other way. And some of you might find that just standing on one leg for this duration is challenging in its own way. So do take a break if you need to, and then you can relax. And that brings us to the end of the first part. So this is what I call part A of the warming up. And in a moment, I'll take you through part B. So welcome to part 2 of this kind of warming up video. This is where we're going to go through a series of 3 patterns of movement, and each pattern is there to kind of focus on a different area. So one of them will focus more into the hips, one of them will focus more into the shoulders, and the other one will focus more into the spine. And hopefully within these little sequences, you'll notice that there's lots of head movement particularly, and we are going to test with a sit and reach test before and after each sequence to see if you're feeling that you're loosening up and relaxing and getting a little bit more supple as we go through these kind of preparatory movements. But these movements on their own are incredibly beneficial in their own right. So don't think that this is just something to get you ready for the deeper stretching. So even if you didn't do the deeper stretching, there's great value to these sequences. So the first thing we're going to do is a sit and reach test. So just bear in mind that it's not a judgment of anything, it's just to see where you are before and after. So if you find that you can only reach your knees or your shins and you're very stiff, that doesn't matter. So just remember where you can get to, and then just see, does it feel easier, or can you go a little bit further after each of the sequences that we do? And remember also that you will have days when you feel stiffer than others, and also you're going to be a bit stiffer in the morning, and you usually get a bit looser and more less tight in the joints as you go through the day. So if you're doing this in the evening, you might find that you're a bit more supple and able to get a bit further. So for me right now, I can feel that I can get my fingertips to my toes, and I'm feeling that particularly in my lower back and a little bit in the kind of hamstring area at the top. So that's where I'm feeling it particularly today, and you might be feeling it in other places. So you might feel it very much in the calf muscles, under the knees, it could be in the neck area. So just notice where you feel it, and we're going to retest after each part and see if there's an improvement. So into the first sequence. So we're going to come into a hands and knees position. So what you want for this is your knees directly under your hips and the heel of your hands directly under your shoulders. So you've created a box shape with your hands and knees. You then want to be aware of your posture through your head, neck and shoulders right down into your spine. So you don't want to be looking up, you don't want the head to be dropped down, and you don't want to be winging through the shoulders or the scapula. So you don't want to be in this position, which is a winging. And you also don't want to be rounded through the lower back. So there's all these little things to pay attention to so that we are starting in a position of good spinal alignment. And so we start the movement by doing circles. And they don't need to be big circles. So I'm going in an anti-clockwise direction, and this just very gently starts to mobilize into the shoulders, the wrists, and particularly the hips. And then we'll change direction. So swapping to clockwise. And you tend to notice, if you're a person that's got particular, maybe one hip is stiffer than the other, you might notice as you do the circles that there's a restriction or a part of the movement where it feels different on one side compared to the other. And it might be if you've got a wrist issue, you might notice there's a little bit of a part of the circular motion where you feel a bit more resistance, and then we come back to the center. So that's the first part. The next part is we're going to rock forwards and then back to the start position. So we're not sitting back, just kind of rocking forwards and backwards. And this is to start to get a little mobility more so into the wrists. And what I've got in my arms is the creases of my elbows are facing forwards. And what I'm going to do to take this a bit further is I'm going to rock forwards and pause, and then rotate and then come back. So I'm rotating the elbows, which starts to really mobilize deeply into the shoulder sockets. So the creases of my elbows are always facing the direction that I'm going to be moving. So my creases are facing forward, so I move forwards, rotate, and then I come back. And so the rocking movement is enough to keep that head motion. So we're moving forwards and backwards, just getting that inner ear stimulation. And then we'll just finish the one that we're doing, and we come back to the center. So the next movement is we sit as far back onto the heels as possible. Let your forearms come down to the floor, bring your nose as close to the floor as you feel comfortable, and then you imagine pushing a marble along the floor until your head is between the hands, and then come up to the start position. If you can't sit very far back because of hip or knee problems, you just go through that movement in a much smaller range. So if you can sit all the way back, then just do whatever your body allows you to do. And this is quite a gentle movement. So for someone who's quite athletic, some of these movements might feel as if they're too gentle to be assisting you in any positive way. But just by doing these movements, you're going to be giving your body a lot of positive help in terms of releasing tension, mobilising the joints, and then we'll do one more. And these are quite restorative, so they can really help you in your recovery from strenuous sessions. So the next movement we're going to do is the weaving cat. So I'm going to take one hand under the supporting arm, and I'm going to look at the hand with my eyes, and I'm going to follow with the eyes as the hand comes across, and I lower the side of my head, or at least the top edge of my head, towards the floor. Come back up, follow the hand with the eyes as it comes out to the side, and then pause. Soften the elbow and the shoulder, and then we twist through the spine and then return back again. And then we swap over. The hand comes under. You're not trying to get your ear onto the mat or the floor, just the top edge of your head, so the head stays in alignment with the rest of your spine. And we follow the hand as it comes out to the side. We pause, and we're very much trying to make sure that we rotate through the spine, and the hand and the arm just follows the body. We're not trying to force the arm into a bigger position, which just locks up the shoulder blade. So we're going to do two more on each side. Follow the hand with the eyes, pause, and then rotate through the spine, and then back, swapping over. Pause, soften the elbow and the shoulder. Twist through the spine, even if you don't go very far. And the last one on each side. Remembering to follow the hand with the eyes, because it just helps to make sure that the head, neck and shoulders are integrated into the movement correctly. And then coming back down. So that completes the weaving cat. And the final part of this is a spinal wave. So this, for a lot of people, will look like a cat-cow to people that do yoga. So if you don't know what the cat-cow is, it's usually where you extend and lift the head up. So you've got this arch in the lower back, and then you go into a rounded position. So you've got these two positions. And the problem with doing that is most of the movement will be through the most supple and mobilized vertebrae that you've got, and some of the other parts that need more mobilizing often don't get the attention that they need. So what we're going to do is a spinal wave. And the way that we do this is to take our awareness to the base of the spine, so right down here at the sacrum. And we're going to start by pushing the tailbone away, lengthening one vertebrae at a time through the lumbar spine, lifting the sternum, and then eventually the head gently looks up. So you're not going to your full position, but just something that's very soft. And then we hold that as we take the awareness back to the base of the spine, and we reverse it. So we start by tucking the tailbone under, and we allow the spine to roll upwards from the base until gently the head will tuck in. So we can start to speed that up. And so it should be natural to want to breathe in as you lengthen the spine and breathe out as you kind of flex and round. And then you can relax, and then we can retest the touching of the toes. So with the legs out straight, and I can go now beyond my fingers, and that is quite a big difference. So there's been quite a lot of mobilizing through wrists, shoulders, into the hips, into a spinal wave. There's been a spinal rotation in there. There's been an opening up across the chest and the shoulders. So lots of very subtle things. So hopefully some of you have noticed maybe a little bit of ease, but it will depend on the individual. If you're already quite supple in that area, there might be not much improvement. Or if you've got a lot of deeper issues going on, there might be also not a big difference, but it's worth testing to see. And if you get a big release, then you know this is an area that if you come back to, it will be very beneficial to work more with that. So we now go into the second sequence in this group of 3, and it starts off with essentially just bending your knees to about 90 degrees, letting your weight rest back onto your hands so you can have a little bit of backward lean with the body, and then separate your feet so they're either shoulder distance or slightly wider. And the movement is to drop one knee inwards as the other knee drops out, and you just pivot on your heels, alternating from left to right, from side to side. So this is the first part of a sequence in which, depending on your hip mobility and your knees, you might find that some of you can only do very small movements such as this, but if you can get both knees onto the floor, that's ideal. And some of you might not be able to get the knees wide apart, so you might be doing something that looks a bit more like this. So everyone is going to be slightly different, and just play with it a little bit. And the idea is just to feel that you can rotate deep into the hip sockets. And if for any reason you're not able to do the next stage of this, then you can just do a little bit more of this to compensate. So then you can relax. And so the next movement is we're going to position ourselves into a position where we have a 90 degree in the knee that is in front of you, and then your other knee is out to the side and the knee is at 90 degrees. And the movement is to line your sternum up with the leg that's in front, and then putting your hands wherever you need them on the floor, you keep the sternum lifted as you pivot forwards. So what we're not doing is this, where you round through the spine and you try to get your head down to the floor. So that's what we're trying not to do. It's about lengthening through the body and pivoting. And some of you might get further than others, but just pivot and you'll feel a bit of a stretch into certain muscles in the hips, maybe the glutes. And then we come up and we keep the heels where they are and we pivot on the heels to then rotate over to face the other direction. And then we do exactly the same. Line your sternum up with the knee, keep the spine long, pivot forwards, and we just alternate from side to side. So we're going to do that a few times. And we're just holding the stretch part for just about 2 or 3 seconds. So it's not a long hold. This is more about the mobility as we rotate through the hips with that little bit of stretch. So it's a dynamic stretch. So then what we do is we go straight into the next part, where we actually, rather than putting your hands on the floor and pivoting forwards, we put the hands behind us and we just go into a twist. So the hands come behind, gently twist, look round. And then we can go into the next part. So in the next part, we do exactly the same, but we see if we can lift the hip off the floor. Rotate into the twist. Can you lift your hip off the floor and then back down again? And then we can take it to the next stage where you twist, you lift the hip, and then see if you can lift your knee off the floor. You don't have to lock out the knee completely, but just see if you can lift. So I lift the hip first. See, can I lift that knee off the floor, straighten a little bit, and we'll just do one more on each side. Lift the hip. If you can, try lifting the knee. Lovely. And then we'll do one more. So that completes the sequence, and we come back to the testing of our sit and reach. So now when I reach forwards, that for me feels like I've released the hips a little bit. And so where I started off kind of just being able to touch my toes, and then I did the sequence which was on the hands and the knees, I was able to go a little bit further. I'm now able to feel that I can go actually quite a bit further. So this is having quite a positive impact for me, releasing tension, and we're now going to go into the third and final part. So one more movement, and it has got a rocking motion to it, and there's about 2 stages with a variation in there if you want to try it. So this is how it's done. So we go into the same position that we were in for the sit and reach, only this time we just bring the arms up to roughly shoulder height, and we just do a little pivot forwards to feel a little bit of stretch through the back of the legs. And then I'm just crossing my thumbs over, and I'm going to bring the arms up alongside the ears, and I'm going to try to feel like I'm lengthening for a moment through the spine. Then what I'm going to do is just roll myself back. So I'm rolling from the lower back through the body, and I let the legs come up. The head can touch the floor. So I'm now on my back with my feet pointing up towards the ceiling. And then to get back up, I use the weight of my legs and a bit of momentum to then bring me back up to that tall position. Bring the arms back, reach. And this is the movement. So this is the stage 1. And if you want to take it to stage 2, it looks a bit like this. So same position, I roll back, and then I go into a kind of a shoulder stand. So I'm trying to push my feet up towards the ceiling, not get my feet over to the floor behind me. Now, you might not be ready to go to that stage 2, so stick with stage 1 if you need to, but regardless of whether you can do stage 2, always start with stage 1. Do 2 or 3 or more, then do stage 2, and then bring in, if you want to, this next stage or this next little variation. So if I was doing the easier version, I come onto my back, I bend one knee, come back up so one leg is straight, and then I do a little reach, and I alternate. So essentially, I've now got a bit more of a hamstring stretch in there. And if you were doing this version, it's the same. It's just that you're pushing up. And there we go. So I can now retest the touching of my toes. And that has really, all 3 together have added something to me feeling that I can go much further and just hold it comfortably in that sit and reach. And that sit and reach is just used as a very general indicator. So if you're doing each of those and you didn't feel any real difference, then you've probably got issues that would require kind of testing to work out what's actually restricting you. And there's all sorts of potential things that can restrict your ability to respond to some of the physical releasing movements. So some of those include things like core stability. So if you're not stabilizing your spine and also your pelvis and your shoulders, you'll find that your body doesn't want to go through big ranges of motion. So if you take a shoulder, for example, the shoulder has all this ability to do big ranges of motion. Now, if for any reason the shoulder becomes unstable, the last thing that your body wants is to have a big range of motion through an unstable joint. So it will lock it down and restrict what you can do with it. It also doesn't want you to put heavy loads through an unstable shoulder, so it will usually inhibit the strength of the muscles so that you can't injure it and dislocate it and cause more problems for yourself. So there's a reason why the body is often doing what it's doing. And the same occurs with spine and the pelvis. So if you've got poor stability, that can be restricting your ability to be very flexible. And also muscle imbalances, and just kind of, if you're doing a lot of very high intensity training, sometimes the body and the muscles are very highly facilitated. So you might need to reduce some of the tension in the system in order for you to respond in terms of mobility and stretching. And some of this work, although you might not feel that you're getting very far with it, does help to relax the nervous system. And as the nervous system relaxes, you can sometimes feel that you're getting a bit more less stress in your system, and you might find over time you get a bit more supple just from doing these movements. And you'll also find it will help you with your recovery.